When you think of vintage Star Wars toys, you think of Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Chewie, and Han, and how awesome the original trilogy was. But in 1985, George Lucas and Lucasfilm took a bit of a detour. To continue the Star Wars money train after Return of the Jedi had come and gone, George looked at his furry little creatures from Endor and said, "That's the future." Today, we are deep diving into one of the most unique, colorful, and obscure corners of the Star Wars universe. Lucasfilm's, Nelvana's, and Kenner's short-lived vintage Ewoks cartoon and action figure line. Were they a massive success or a rare action figure failure? Let's find out on this episode of
Retro Roy Talks Toys!
Before we talk about the figures, let's talk briefly about the cartoon itself. To capture a younger audience 2 years after Return of the Jedi, Lucasfilm teamed up with the legendary Canadian animation studio Nelvana, the same studio that produced animated figures such as Care Bears, My Pet Monster, and Mad Balls, and as well as the animated segment in the Star Wars Holiday Special. Star Wars Ewoks lasted from Saturday, September 7th, 1985 to Saturday, December 13th, 1986, spanning a total of 35 episodes over 2 seasons on ABC. It initially aired alongside its sister show Droids as part of the Ewoks and Droids Adventure Hour. Side note, we're going to be talking about the Kenner Droids animated figures in a future video. I'll film that episode as soon as I get the last 3 figures I need to finish that line, but please give me time. Those figures are expensive. The Ewoks animated series followed a young, wicked Warwick and his friends Princess Nisa, Latera, Teebo, Chief Chirpa, and Paplu as they go on adventures on Endor. Several episodes had our Ewok heroes defend their home, Bright Tree Village, against not stormtroopers, but the sinister Morag the Tulok Witch, and the green, swamp-dwelling Duloks led by King Gornish. Of course, a 1985 Lucasfilm cartoon meant one thing: action figures. Kenner, who had been absolutely printing money with the main Star Wars toy line since 1978, stepped up to bat. In 1985, they released a dedicated Ewoks animated feature line. These weren't just standard repaints of existing figures, they featured a brand new stylized cartoon-accurate look and bright pastel colors. Only 6 figures were released in Ewoks Wave 1. For the Force line, Kenner packed coins in with each of the figures. These 6 coins are just as collectible and as hard to find today as the figures themselves, commanding huge prices on their own. These were born out of Kenner's legendary Power of the Force marketing campaign. Kenner realized that kids were losing interest in traditional action figures, so they started to add these premium coins in to make the packaging pop, and honestly, the craftsmanship was pretty staggering. Each coin featured a stylized, beautifully embossed portrait of the character on the front, and flip it over, you're going to find a brief character-specific description stamped right into the aluminum alongside the official, stylized Star Wars Ewoks animated logo. And I would be remiss if I didn't briefly also touch on the small Ewoks Playskool line. If you thought the animated Kenner figures were tiny and adorable, these little bite-sized figures take the cake. Aimed at the preschool demographic, these little figures had 0 points of articulation. 3 playsets were also in the Playskool line: the Ewok Fire Cart, the Ewok Woodland Wagon, and the Ewok Family Hut. I spoke briefly in my last video about collectors having to draw the line somewhere as far as their collections go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is my line in the sand. Personally, I don't have any of the Ewoks Playskool line in my collection, even though I've seen these figures at many toy shows. I do consider myself a vintage Star Wars Kenner collector, but these are just not my cup of tea. If you have these figures in your collection, all the power to you. Collect what you love and love to collect, but these are just not for me. Leave a comment below if you have the Playskool line in your collection. Do you consider the Playskool line a necessary part of a Kenner collection? Who knows? Maybe you guys will change my mind and I'll get into them. So, did Kenner and Lucasfilm have another world-changing multi-million-dollar hit on their hands? The short answer is no. Look, by 1985, with no new Star Wars movies on the horizon, kids were already moving on to some massive heavy hitters in the toy aisle, such as Transformers, Masters of the Universe, and G.I. Joe, just to name a few. The mid-'80s were a glorious time for action figures, and needless to say, the Ewoks line struggled on store shelves. Because of low sales, the cartoon was ultimately cancelled in 1986 by ABC, and Kenner completely cancelled Wave 2 of the figures. Now, according to legend, Kenner was very far along in the production phase of Ewoks Wave 2. Designs were finished, molds were cut, and fully painted packaging mock-ups of the next 6 figures were sitting in Kenner's offices. Those 6 figures would have been Chief Chirpa, Paplu, Weechi, Bondo, Morag the Two-Log Witch, and Chitter. Because these toys sold poorly in 1985, they are incredibly rare today, making them highly collectible for vintage Kenner Star Wars collectors. Back in 1985, a figure would set you back just a few dollars. Today, honestly, the secondary market is wild for these figures, with both loose and carded examples commanding big money. The Ewoks cartoon line remains a fascinating moment in Star Wars history. It represents the dying breaths of Kenner's golden age of Star Wars toys, mixed with the charm of classic 80s Saturday morning cartoons. They might not have been a success in 1985, but I believe they've kind of achieved a sort of cult status with collectors, including myself. So what do you think? Did you watch the cartoon as a kid? Do you feel like your vintage Star Wars collection is not complete unless it contains the Droids and Ewoks line? Do you have any of these rare figures in your collection? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next episode of
Retro Roy Talks Toys.